Good morning, y'all. It's Mr. Sheets from Shoals again. I want to read a couple more chapters of the Day of the Dragon King Magic Treehouse book. Hope you guys had a good day yesterday. So we'll go ahead and get started with chapter 7 of the Day of the Dragon King. It's the burning of the books. The Dragon King watched the bonfire as it blazed up toward the sky. Around the fire, the air was thick and wavy. Bamboo books were being stacked beside the fire, waiting to be burned. "Hurry," said the scholar. They jumped down from the cart and joined the crowd by the bonfire. The Dragon King shouted to the soldiers as they began throwing the books into the fire. The bamboo crackled as it burned. "Stop!" cried Annie. Jack grabbed her. "Quiet," he said. Annie pulled away. "Stop!" she shouted again, but her voice was lost in the noise of the roaring fire. "There's your story," said the scholar. He pointed to a bamboo book that had fallen off of a waiting stack. "I'll get it," said Annie. She dashed over to the book. "Annie!" cried Jack, but she had already snatched up the bundle of bamboo strips and was charging back to them. "Got it! Quick, put it in your sack," she said. Jack put the bundle of bamboo strips in his sack. Then he looked around fearfully. He gasped. The Dragon King was glaring at them. He headed their way. "Seize them!" the Dragon King shouted. "Run through the burial grounds," the scholar said to Jack and Annie. "The soldiers will be afraid to follow. They fear the spirits of the ancestors." "Thanks," said Jack. "Thanks for everything." "Good luck," cried Annie. Then she and Jack took off. Soldiers shouted after them. An arrow whizzed by. But Jack and Annie kept running. They ran down the path to the burial grounds. They jumped over the low brick wall and ran between the huge mounds of earth. Suddenly arrows filled the air around them. The archers were shooting from the tower. "Look!" cried Jack. There was a doorway in one of the mounds. Jack and Annie ducked inside. They were in a long hall lit with oil lamps. It was so quiet. "It's so quiet," said Annie. She walked down the passageway. "Hey, there are some steps here." "Don't go any farther," said Jack. "Why not?" said Annie. "We don't know what's down there," said Jack. "This is a burial tomb, remember? It's creepy." "Let's just take a quick look," said Annie. "Maybe it's the way out of here." Jack took a deep breath. "You might be right," he said. "Okay, but go slow." He didn't want to stumble upon a dead body. Annie started down the steps. Jack followed. The lamps lit their way as they kept going down and down. Finally, they reached the bottom. Jack blinked. Even though oil lamps glowed everywhere, it was hard to see at first. When Jack's eyes got used to the strange light, he heard a noise. His heart nearly stopped. "Oh man," he breathed. They were in a room filled with soldiers, thousands of them. Chapter 8: The Tomb. Jack and Annie stood frozen. The silent soldiers did too. Finally, Annie spoke. "They're fake," she said. "Fake?" whispered Jack. "They're not real," she said. "They look real," said Jack. Annie walked straight toward the front row of soldiers. Jack held his breath. Annie pulled the soldier's nose. "Fake," she said. "Oh, brother," said Jack. He walked over to the soldier and touched its painted face. It was hard as stone. "It's amazing," Jack said. Annie nodded. "It's like a museum." She walked down a row between two lines of soldiers. "Wait, this is spooky," said Jack. "What is this place?" He put down his sack and pulled out the china book. He found a picture of the frozen army and read aloud. The Dragon King had 7,000 life-size clay figures made for his burial tomb. The clay was baked and painted. The Dragon King hoped that the clay army would protect him after he died. "It's like the pyramid in ancient Egypt," said Jack. "Remember? The queen was buried with a boat and lots of things to take to the afterlife." He looked around. "Annie?" "I'm here," she called. She was far down another row. "Come back here," yelled Jack. "No, you come here," said Annie. "It's so cool. All their faces are different." Jack threw the book in his sack. Then he hurried down the road to Annie. "Look," she said. "Just look." In the flickering lamplight, they wandered down a row of soldiers. No two soldiers had the same nose, the same eyes, or the same mouth. "Oh man, no wonder so many people had to work on this tomb," said Jack. "They did a really good job," said Annie. Yeah, said Jack. They were kneeling archers and foot soldiers dressed in red and black armor. They were real bronze swords, daggers, axes, spears, bows, and arrows. There were even life-size wooden chariots with horses. The horses looked completely real. They were different colors with white teeth and red tongues. I have to take some notes about all this, said Jack. He pulled out his notebook and pencil. Then, kneeling on the brick floor, he wrote, "No two faces the same, not even the horses." "Jack," said Annie, "you know what?" "What?" "I think we're lost," she said. "Lost?" Jack stood up. "We're not lost." "Yeah, then which way is out?" said Annie. Jack looked around. All he could see were rows of soldiers. In front of them, to the right, to the left, behind them, nothing but clay soldiers. "Which way did we come?" said Annie. "I don't know," said Jack. "All the roads look the same. They stretched out endlessly." Jack tried not to panic. "I better look this up," he said. "Forget it," said Annie. "Morgan said the research book would guide us. But in our darkest hour, only the ancient legend would save us." "Is this our darkest hour?" asked Jack. Annie nodded. "Yeah, it's pretty dark." "It does seem to be getting darker in here," thought Jack. The air was getting thicker, too. It seemed harder to breathe. "Let's ask for help," said Jack. He reached into the sack and pulled out the bamboo book. He held it up and said, "Save us." As Jack waited, the tomb seemed unbearably quiet. Jack held up the book again. "Please help us find our way out," he said. He and Annie kept waiting, but nothing happened. The air was growing even thicker. The light was getting dimmer. The countless rows of soldiers seemed creepier. Help did not come. Jack felt faint. I guess we'll just have to." "Look," said Annie. "What?" "The ball of thread. It rolled out of your sack," she said. "So what?" said Jack. He looked at his cloth sack laying on the floor. The ball of yellow silk thread had rolled out, and it was still rolling, leaving a trail of yellow thread. And that's chapter 7 and 8. I'll be back tomorrow. We'll read some more. Hope you guys have a great day. Love y'all. Miss you.